Welcome to tutorial 4. I'm Tom Stevenson, and in today's tutorial we're going to be looking at adding resources to your project. So in this project we're going to be taking this layout of this project and we're going to be setting up a resource sheet. So in the resource sheet we're going to be adding the various subcontractors, suppliers, major materials, etc. that we want to basically monitor our project activities. So if you recall in tutorial 3, we looked at the Gantt chart and we looked at the different ways that we could access different sheets and different tables and different views. So you can find the different views. I mentioned that there's two easy ways to do that. One is what I call the square icon box. You click on it and you right click and you'll see there's cost, entry, hyperlink, schedule. These are all different views, and we spent a little bit of time and we looked at the cost, the entry, the tracking, the schedule view, and the variance views. Those are the predominant views that we use, although other views are also very helpful. As well, we showed you how to slide to the left, right click on your mouse, and then you have another selection of tables and views. Particularly, we looked at the network diagram, which provides you with an overall view of how the project is connected activity by activity. And it shows the critical path in red, which is the longest path through your project. You can scale that in or out by hitting the minus or plus at the bottom right of your screen. My image might be right blocking it, but it's right behind that image. You'll see a minus and a plus, and you can shrink that down or scale that up. It doesn't change any of the information, it just changes how you view the information. We mentioned that the parallelogram, that would be your summary task. It shouldn't be connected to anything, but your activities, they will be all connected. If they're not connected, it means that you're missing something. Best practice is to ensure that all the activities are connected in your project, so your critical path is actually correct. It doesn't mean it's correct though, just that. You got to make sure you've got the activities correctly linked, that how you want to run your project. So I'm going to slide to the left here. I'm going to right click and I'm going to select resource sheet. So if you recall from the last time, I said you could also put the view bar here, and that puts a toolbar where you could also just scroll down and you could scroll till you see resource sheet and you could select it that way. To be honest, I usually just slide, right click, and pick whatever view I want. All right, so in this particular view, you see a table, and the table has a bunch of columns. So you got resource, name, type, materials, initials, group, maximum, standard rate, overtime rate, cost, use, accrue, base, code, etc. So there's a series of standard columns that you will see. And under the resource names, I'm going to add a few resources just for us to try to add to our project file. So I'm going to say site super. I could say PM for project manager. I could say laborers for if we have laborers that work directly for us. And then I could put a bunch of subcontractors. I could say ABC plumbing, DEF HVAC as an example. You'd put your subcontractors' names in there. GHI electrical, and so on. All right, so I'm going to put on another one. I'm going to call it drywall. All right, just for that. And so we just put in a few here. Now, you see it says type over here. You have a choice in Microsoft Project of 3 types. You have work, material, and cost. So if it's something that's going to be working on an hourly basis, then you would leave it at work. And you would put an hourly rate. So let's say I wanted to put for the site super, and this would be the burdened rate for the site super. So I'm going to put $70 an hour. The burdened rate would be the rate that includes everything: holiday pay, safety compensation, WSIB, whatever type of safety compensation your state or province requires. So that would be an hourly rate. Doesn't mean that you're paying that person directly that, but that's all the costs that are associated per hour with that individual. And let's say the same thing for the project manager. Laborers, let's say that they're at $50 an hour. Plumbing, let's say that that one we're not going to do because plumbing is, we've contracted that work out to them. So they're a subcontractor and we've got a lump sum price on our project for that. So we're going to put that down as a cost. And we're going to put the next one down as a cost because they're all subcontractors. You could actually pull this on the right, this little square here, and it will copy it down. So if you had a bunch of them to do in a row, you could do that. And for drywall, just to make it interesting, I'm just going to put it as a material, just to show you how that particular type works. It's a little bit more rarely used. Work and cost are very frequently used. And if you put material, you would want to say, well, how is this material being measured? So I'm going to say square foot. So you'd put some sort of abbreviation that would indicate how it's being measured. If it was concrete, you might put cubic yards or cubic meters. So depending on what the measurement is, that's what you would type in there. That way you'll recognize it later on when you see the abbreviation, how it's being measured. You can group these activities. It allows you to sort things later on. So like you could have super for EMP, employee, meaning that they work for you. You could have the plumbing as a sub, and you could have drywall as a supplier. Okay, so you put some sort of short form, however you would want to have these grouped. Now you notice that it says maximum amount. So that's how many you have available on the project. So we're going to say the site super is 100%. That means the site super is 100% on this project. We're going to say that the PM is 50% on this project. So what that means is that no time should this project manager be taking more than 50% of their time on the project. Really, it works well when you're assigning somebody like to the whole project. Maybe the project takes 3 months and you have that project manager, they're looking after 2 projects and you figure they're going to be 50% on this project and 50% on another project. Laborers, let's say that you had 3 laborers working for you that you knew that you could assign to this project maximum. This would be the maximum that you would expect to assign of your own forces laborers to this particular project. Because what will happen is if somehow you assign 4 laborers at any one point, it'll flag it for you. It'll turn red, and what you're really saying with that is that you've over allocated the resource of laborers, which is very helpful. So we've entered a bunch of this information here, and we see here it has, well, cost per use. Cost per use is more rarely used. Cost per use would be, let's say you had a disposal box that was coming. Every time you bring it to the project, every time you assign it, it would put this cost on there. So if every time I had a disposal box dropped at my site, I had to pay a $200 fee, then maybe I'd put $200. So every time I assign a box to an activity, it's going to ka-ching $200 to that, plus whatever other cost I might apply to it. And you only see cost per use in things like the laborers or material, because you could always also do this with an equipment rate, because maybe you're renting equipment by the hour, an excavator. Maybe every time you assign that, the rental company delivers it, and there's a $75 delivery charge. That could be a cost per use. So we have how we accrue it, and this we'll do in another tutorial, but it really takes how we assign the resources, and it looks at how Microsoft Project is going to account for how the payments are done. So you could think of it like cash flow. You have 3 choices: at the start, at the end, and prorated. Usually for somebody that works for you, who's working on a steady basis, prorated makes the most sense. If I put at the start, and let's say the site super was there for the whole project, and the project was a year long, it would mean that Microsoft Project would think that, oh, the site super is here for a whole year. If the site super works for a year, they would get paid $100,000. So we'll give them $100,000 on the first day. Well, that's not going to work, right? Conversely, if we put it at the end, we would expect the site super to work the whole year and we're going to pay them at the end. Well, that's not going to work either. Prorated, which is as each day is going through, the money is being paid out, that would be the closest to paying them every 2 weeks. So from a tracking point of view, from a cash flow point of view, prorated makes the most sense for people that work for you directly, that you're paying on an ongoing basis. Now, subcontractors, that's a different story. A subcontractor, we've contracted to do the work and we're going to pay them at specific intervals. So generally we have a payment schedule or a schedule of values that we've worked out at the beginning of the project of when we plan to pay these contractors for the work that they're doing. So instead of putting prorated, we might want to put something to the effect of at the end of the activity that they're performing, particularly if the activities are going to be shorter in nature. So if the activities are going to be, and to really track projects well, we want to have the activity shorter in nature. We don't have an activity that's 90 days long. So if we have an activity that's 10, 15 days long, if we assign ABC Plumbing to it, we probably don't want to pay them till the end of that particular activity. We don't want to pay them at the start, and we probably don't want to pay them prorated, so we're going to be looking at things like at the end. And we may not pay them on every activity either. We might have 2 or 3 activities, and then on the third one we pay them a certain amount based on what our schedule of values and what we've agreed to in our subcontract agreement with that particular subcontractor. For a drywall, let's say that we didn't have an account with this particular supplier and they wanted to have a certified check or a credit card or whatever paid right at the beginning when they deliver it. So we'll put that one at the start. Usually it'll probably be at the end, but usually when you get a delivery, it doesn't really matter whether it's at the start or the end if you've got a separate activity for that delivery. So we'll put it there like that just to make it interesting. We could also at this point, if we had a special calendar for any of these resources, if they're work resources, we can assign the special calendar here. Because I don't have any special calendar in this particular case, so we won't worry about that. We showed you how you could set up a custom calendar, I believe, in tutorial 2 or 3, and you can check that one out if you want to learn more about calendars. So if we've set this up, we now have our resource table set up. What we're going to do is, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to our Gantt chart, all right, which is up here, or you could have clicked up there, or you could have right-clicked and just went Gantt chart, which I usually do. And nothing has changed on our project right now. It's still exactly the same as it was. However, what we want to do is we want to now add resources to our activities. So Microsoft Project allows you to add resources a number of different ways. You can pull it from the pull down menu here where there's a listing of resources. I typically do not do that. It doesn't give me enough flexibility. You can also split your screen where it will split it, and you can actually go down here and right click and you could say resources. Well, there's your resources here, and you could select resources there and assign it that way. That's another way that you can do it. Still not the way I usually do it. A lot of people do like to split the screen and do it that way. The way I generally do it is I go to the resource tab and I click where it says assign resources. So I click where it says assign resources. It brings up the assign resources dialog box. I like this box because you can actually work outside it and go into it. You know how most boxes that you open up don't allow you to work outside the box until you close it? This one you can. So that's one of the reasons I tend to like this. And then plus, I don't need that open, so I can have more of my screen available when I'm assigning resources to it. So for the assignment of resources, and people do this in different ways. I've just put a very simple sort of construction project with this office project where there's a bunch of things going on. Very simple right now for our purposes. I would typically have it divided into pre-construction and construction, and then you'd have a much more detail in a work breakdown structure with different summary tasks. But for our purposes right now, I've just got the office project. If you know that there's going to be people that are going to be there the whole time on the project, I would suggest that you assign them to a heading. That's much more helpful. You don't want to assign them to individual activities, because what if the activities overlap each other and you've got one site super and now you've assigned them to two tasks and they overlap each other? Well, that's going to count that site super twice. It's going to say, as you'll see, that you're over allocating that site super, and it's not going to calculate the amount of cost correctly. But if I assign the site super because I know they're going to be there the whole time on the project, or the whole time on a section of the work breakdown structure, it doesn't have to be on the whole project, it could be on any heading that I put in, then I'm going to do that. And you'll see right there, it says 100%, and it says $46,480. So I'm going to take my cell phone here, and I'm going to just open it up, and I'm going to go to my calculator, and I'm going to look at this. And then you see, notice up at the top it says that you've got 83 days. So you have 83 days duration up there. So the 83 days duration, I'm going to take and I'm going to multiply that times 70. So we said $70 an hour under the resource sheet. And I'm going to multiply that by 8 hours a day. And I get $46,480. So I get that same number there. That's how the software counts the money being applied. I'm also going to take the PM, and I'm going to assign the PM 50% to the project. So I'm going to assign the PM 50% to the project. Okay, so PM is now assigned 50% to the project, and that's at $23,240. All right, so you can see that you've got the PM there half the time and the site supers there the whole time. And that's how I would handle that if I have a PM that's going to be part-time on a particular project. The other things that I can do now is I can assign resources to activities. So for example, I've got rough-in HVAC, so I would want to assign DEF HVAC there. Now, I would have had some sort of contract with DEF HVAC, and let's say the contract for this was $50,000. And maybe I had determined that I'm going to pay them $30,000 at the end of them doing the rough-in of the HVAC. All right, so I'm going to put $30,000 here, and I'm going to click Assign. So once I assign them there, that's got the $30,000. Then rough-in electrical, let's say that I was going to pay them $40,000 for the job, and I was going to give them $20,000 at this point. So I'm going to go where it says cost. I'm going to go $20,000. I'm going to click Assign, and that's going to assign that $20,000. Now, if I drop down to where it says complete HVAC ceiling, I'm going to go back to DEF, and I'm going to put another $20,000 where it says DEF, and I'm going to assign DEF $20,000. So I've got those assignments done, and I'm going to go to the electrical. Where was the electrical? Install ceiling, and maybe I've got finish electrical. There we go. And so let's say I'm going to put the remaining $20,000 with GHI Electrical, $20,000 assigned. Okay, so we've just done some assignments. Maybe we should do the plumbing one too. What do you think? Let's do the plumbing. So we'll add for the plumbing, we're going to say it's $30,000 in total. So I'm going to put $15,000 here, and I'm going to go down to where we got finished plumbing, and I'm going to put $15,000 there. So we just assigned those costs to those particular areas. And let's do the laborers. Let's say that the laborers are going to do the boarding. All right, so for whatever the reason we don't have a subcontractor, we're going to say that the laborers are going to do the boarding. If I had a drywall sub, I would be just assigning them the way I did with the others. But let's say that we are going to install the drywall ourselves. So in a case like that, the laborers, it won't allow me to put a cost. You notice that I'm trying to type a cost, but it won't let me put a cost. That's because I set it up as work. When you set it up in the resource sheet as work, it won't let you just type in a cost. It only let me type in a cost if I had that cost set up, that resource set up as a cost in the resource sheet. And I'll just go back to the resource sheet to remind you of that. So let's go back there. Let's see, the resource sheet is here. So here's your resource sheet. This dialog box stays up, which is kind of cool. And you notice that I have the laborers down as work, whereas I've got these ones down as a cost. And this allowed me to put maximum amounts. I can't put a maximum amount. I can't put a maximum amount when it's a cost. It won't let me enter that in there. So when I can't enter something, the first thing you should think is, oh, it's probably how I've set this up. So don't get all frustrated if you're in the other screen and you're trying to put in cost and it won't let you. It's because you probably have it down as work. Or if you've got something as work and it won't let you put in units, you probably got it, what it is instead of work, you've got it as a cost. So that's usually a distinguishing feature that you'll find. This usually messes people up if you by accident put the wrong one. You can always change it if you do, but you got to figure that part out. And in the meantime, it might drive you a little bit insane because you're trying to figure out what happened and why won't it let you, and you keep doing the same thing over and over again. They say insanity is trying to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. So you'll find that with software, if it doesn't work after a few times, then you got to start asking yourself, so what possibly could be preventing me from being able to do that? It must be how I set something up, and then go back and try and check how you set it up. Like for example, I just remembered I didn't put a cost per square foot for my drywall material. And if I go put in how many square feet it is, it won't give me a calculation until I say how much it is per square foot. So let's say it's 50 cents a square foot, 0.50. And let's go back to our Gantt chart, right? So we'll just go over here and we're going to go where we said the laborers are going to install board one side. So I'm going to say right now to start with, I'm going to say that we have one poor laborer that's assigning this, and I'm going to go assign. So it's 9 days, $3,600. I think we said the laborer was going to make $50 an hour, and it's based on an 8-hour day. So that would be $400 a day. And we have 9 days, 4 times 9 is 36, or 3,600. So $400 times 9 is going to give us $3,600. So that's what it's calculating there. And that's fine. Maybe we've been doing that and we've gone out and we've gone to board second side, and maybe we did the same thing and we've assigned one laborer. And so board second side was also 9 days. That's fine. And then maybe we thought, well, wait a minute, that's a mistake. There's no way we're going to have only one person installing the drywall. So we're going to make that, instead, we're going to make that be 2 people. So watch what happens when I change the units. So 200% means 2 people. 300% means 3 people. 50% means half a person, like in the case of Project Manager, who's there half the time. So I'm going to click that. Watch what happens. This is $3,600. This is 200%, and this is 90 days, right? So let's click it and see what happens. Did you see that that changed to 4.5 days? It went from 9 days to 4.5 days. 9 days to 4.5. So we went from 9 days to 4.5 because we added a second person. Microsoft Project refers to that as effort-driven scheduling. You can sort of think of it this way. If I had a ditch to dig and I had one person, a laborer, to dig it, so I assigned them, and it's going to take 2 weeks. If I put a second person, Microsoft Project's going to say, well, you got 2 people now, it should only take 1 week instead of 2 weeks. There is a problem with that, though. And when we entered the information, notice when I entered it the first time, it'll just do it. So if I put 200% the first time, it would just keep it at 9 days. It's when I go back to it, Microsoft Project institutes effort-driven scheduling, which shortens the time frame. So if I had that same ditch that's being dug, and we're going from 2 weeks to 1 week, because now we got 2 laborers, if I add another 2 laborers, that would be 4 laborers, then it should be 2.5 days. So I got 4 laborers, 2.5 days. If I add another 4 laborers, I double it again, that should be 1.25 days. So I got 8 laborers, 1.25 days. If I add another 8 laborers, that should be 5 hours, or 5.5 hours, I guess. Do you see how there's a problem with that? It's not going to work at a certain point. It might work pretty well for going with from 2 weeks to 1 week, but there's a law of diminishing returns. At a certain point, it doesn't work linearly. It's not an equation that you want to follow in a linear fashion. So you have to be very cognizant of that, because maybe that's not what you want. Maybe what I wanted was 2 laborers, 9 days. If I wanted 2 laborers, 9 days, then I should change this back. But just beware, of course, when I change this back to 9, watch what happens to the cost. Okay, I'll go back up here. The cost just doubled, right? Because now I'm paying 2 laborers for 9 days instead of 2 laborers for 4.5 days. So you have to be conscious that the program does that. You have to keep your eye on it when you enter information, just to make sure that it's entering it the way you wanted it to enter it. So that is adding those particular activities there. You might have a activity that you want to add to this. So let's go here. I'm just on board one side. What I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to click on what we call scroll to task. So you see the board one side here. Well, now I'm in that row and I don't see anything here. I'd like to see what's going on. So I'm going to click scroll to task. Scroll to task is under the task tab. So I'm going to click scroll to task. And that brings me up over here, right? So it brings me up to this particular spot. So at least I see what's exactly going on. So what I'm going to do is, where it says drywall, I'm going to add, I don't know, let's say 10,000 feet. So I'm just going to go 10,000. I'm going to press enter. And if I pulled this to the side, see how it says square feet? Remember we typed that in our resource sheet. So we typed that, if we go back to the resource sheet, we typed in square foot over here. Well, whatever I type in here, it puts it beside the Gantt chart. So it'll put it in right beside it. If I go to that board one side, 10,000 square feet. So when I put 10,000, it knows you're measuring square feet. Also remember, I put 50 cents a square foot, so that would be $5,000. Half of 10,000, $5,000. So it is adding these bits and costs and resources onto my project as I go. If I pull this to the side, I should see these listed over here under the resource column, resource names and columns, and it'll put the costs in beside it. I can also slide to the right. Depending how your program's set up, it likely will show the numbers to the side over here as well if you're cost loading it. I should mention in some projects, a lot of projects, you just add resources and maybe it's not being cost loaded, but we're showing you how to actually cost resource and cost load your project so you can see how it can track your costs. So we've added these costs here. They're put into place and that's great, but what's this mean? What's going on? Well, if you recall from tutorial 3, we looked at the different screens. If you click on the square icon box, you can look at the cost screen, and it will show you how much everything is totaling that you've added to your project so far. So we've added the $30,000, the $20,000, the $15,000, $12,200, $3,600, $20,000. I think we've got some near the end as well over here for our electrical and our plumbing. It's adding all of those up. Now, if you add those up, you'll see it doesn't come to 205,520, because what you have to remember too is that on the top heading, we had also assigned our project manager and our site super. So it would be short this amount. But that amount is included in all of these, plus that will give you the $205,520. So you can quickly see where the costs have been applied, except for those two resources. There's another way that you can review your resource costs, which can be very helpful. But before we do that, I want you to take a look at, see how it says total cost, it says baseline, it says variance, it says actual, remaining. Later on, when we look at updating a project, the nice thing about that is once we set the baseline, it's going to remember all these amounts, and it's going to copy these amounts, and it's going to put them beside in this column, in the baseline column. And then if these amounts change, it's going to look at the variance, the difference between what's going on in your project, what you plan to go on the project, and what the difference is. So if you're over budget, it would show how much your variance is, over budget or under budget. It will show you how much money you've spent or actually incurred up to that point, and then it would tell you how much is remaining based on the difference. So that is quite helpful when you start to monitor and control your project. So everything we're doing now is to help us later in our project. So everything we're doing now, it will help us later in our project. Some of you may notice that there's fixed cost over here. These are usually for administrative accounting costs that may want to add in, but they're not somewhere where we're typically adding our costs. Most cost-loaded schedules are utilizing the functions that I've just been outlining. But if you had some special cost that you wanted to put in for some reason, this is one way to keep it separate and to put it in. But generally, the way I'm showing you is the best way to put it. So the other thing the other area I would like to review, for example, I'd like to see how much have I assigned to the electrical sub? How much have I assigned to the HVAC sub? Here I can see when I'm going to be paying it out, but I don't see how much I've assigned to them. So I'm going to go back to the resource sheet. And you know what? The resource sheet has a square icon box too, and you can click on it, and it's got a cost sheet as well. So I'm going to go to cost, and right here I can see what everybody is totaling. Remember the DEF HVAC? That's $50,000. We had two payments, right? We had one was $30,000, I believe, and one was $20,000. I think ABC Plumbing we had $15,000 and $15,000, and I think GHI we had $20,000 and $20,000. What you'd want to do is make sure here that this amount here is totaling what your contract is with them. So you might have 6 or 7 payments, but the 6 or 7 payments should total what your contract is. And remember, we weren't sure what our site super and PM was? Well, now we're sure. We can just look at it here. So we can see what all our resources are listed at individually. On the other sheet, we see how they sum up. And if we had shorter headings like pre-construction, construction, or building systems, or superstructure, we could see what each cost area was costing. And we could assign account codes that would help us track that in our account software if we were detailing our costing more functionally. So this is one way of setting up a cost-loaded schedule. And we do all of this before we start the project. We're setting ourselves up so we have the layout, the plan, how we want to run our project. We've discussed these timelines with our subcontractors that we've already procured. Ones that we haven't, we're going to be looking at historical data that we may have, experience. We're going to be drawing on a number of factors and pulling together timeframes and durations to come up with our overall schedule. And we're thinking about how the sequencing has to work, how many things we can have going on at once, And this is our best effort of this plan at this moment in time. Of course, when you manage projects, these are going to change as you update the schedule. And we'll look at that information in other tutorials. But to recap, what we really looked at today was how do we set up a resource sheet and how do we do it effectively. And just before I actually get into the recap, I do want to show you one more thing. We did say that, I'm just going to go here with the square icon box. Yeah, I got to get used to these square icon box. Where am I? I'd like to go into the entry view for the resource sheet. Entry is where we enter usually. Doesn't matter which view we're in. So in the resource sheet, I wanted to go to entry. And we said we had laborers maximum 300%. I want to go back to the Gantt chart. And I want to assign 4 laborers. I think we had 3 laborers assigned. Yes, we did. Oh, we had 2 laborers. I want to assign 4 laborers. Maybe I'll keep it at, let it go to 4.5 days. So you see how that went to 4.5 days, but you see this little red guy that appeared? This appeared in the indicator column. I mentioned one of the earlier tutorials. This is a very handy column because when you do stuff, it'll show up here. So it says this task has over allocated resources. Right click for options. Well, what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to go check my resource sheet. Down here, scroll resource sheet. And you see, I know which one it is that is over allocated. It's my laborers. I said that I have 300% available, yet I assigned 400% for laborers. So the problem is, do I only have 3 laborers that work for me? If I only have 3 laborers that work for me, then I've got to go back and I got to change what I just did, right? So I might be able to up it from 200% to 300%, but I can't go to 400%. The other choice is you could say, well, maybe we have hired 1 more laborer. We have 4 now. So we're then okay. If I change this to then 4, it'll say it's okay and it won't be red anymore. So it's a flag for you to say, hey, you've assigned too many, more than you said you have available. What do you want to do? And so that's a flag, and then you can fix it based on what you want to do. You either change the schedule so you don't use as much, or you hire more, or you change the timing of the schedule, something around those lines. So that's something to think about when you're using the software. If you see the little red Martian guy there, you don't want him there. You want to figure out, well, what do we want to change to make this work out better? Okay, so I think that is the main elements that I wanted to cover. We're very familiar now with switching screens. We can put in our view bar. We can get rid of our view bar. We can right click if we're over on the left side, and we can go to our resource sheet here, and that will give us an indicator of where the resources are. And we'll look at resources a little bit more in depth in another tutorial, but I just wanted to get everybody that they have a good understanding of how we apply resources to our project and get used to switching between screens. The square icon box, I can go to the cost screen. I can see information there. I can see here now with work. There should be some work indicated now that I'm adding resources. So you can see where the hours of work that are being applied wherever I put in resources. That's the work screen. Usage, we can see again the hours of work that's listed out over here. So there's that information there. And we can switch between screens pretty easily as we go back to the entry view. Gantt chart on the side. We can go to the resource sheet. There is what we call a resource graph. As I said, I'll get into that in another tutorial. That would also show you your over allocations that are occurring in a histogram. There we are. You can go to the square icon box. I can see my costs more readily. I can see what's going on with my costs. You'll see as we track things, these become really of value. Okay, I think that's what I wanted to cover today, and I hope you have a good sense of how we can apply, add resources, add costs, check our costs, see what they're totaling up to, And this is all leading up to us to be able to set a baseline so that when we update our schedule, we can start tracking, are we ahead of schedule, behind schedule? Are we on budget or over budget? If we're over budget, where are we over budget? And documenting that information so we can act in a smart and planned way. So that's it for today, everybody. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great day. I'm Tom Stevenson, just signing off for now. Bye.